Welcome back. Today, humanitarian needs around the world are rising to unprecedented levels, driven by conflict, climate-related disasters, displacement, and health emergencies, even as funding for aid continues to shrink. In response, the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies has launched its Global Plan 2026, a renewed call to strengthen locally led humanitarian action, ensuring resources, expertise, and decision-making are placed closer to the communities that need them most. To discuss what this plan means in practice and how the IFRC is adapting to meet growing global challenges, we are joined by HIMYA MAJEED, Senior Advisor for National Society Development at the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies. Fatima, thanks for joining us. Now, the IFRC's new global plan says humanitarian needs are at unprecedented levels. From your perspective, what are the main driving factors of this surge right now?
First of all, thank you so much for the opportunity. What we are witnessing today is the merge of multiple global crises happening simultaneously. And this overlap is what is driving humanitarian needs to unprecedented levels, as we all know. And one of the major driving factors is the climate crisis, of course, that has become the single biggest driver of humanitarian needs. The climate crisis is no longer a future threat. It is today's biggest human driver, and it is our present. Across Asia, Africa, and the Americas, we are seeing catastrophic floods, droughts, and devastating storms that has wiped out years of rehabilitation and recovery just by a single event. And these shocks are actually hitting the same communities repeatedly, significantly impacting their ability to recover. And across Asia and Pacific, for example, recurring monsoon flooding has displaced millions year after year, especially over the recent past. And countries like Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Indonesia, Vietnam, and even in Malaysia, we are seeing floods not as isolated events anymore, but rather as recurring humanitarian emergencies. Recently, as we all have seen, in Sri Lanka alone, the flood has affected around 1.7 million people, damaging over 100,000 homes and disrupting their health, water, and transportation systems. The Sri Lankan Red Cross, strongly supported by the IFRC, has been responding to the emergencies by providing shelter, clean water, health, and as well as psychosocial support to the affected families. Another driver, I would say, of course, is the fact that conflicts are lasting longer and becoming more complex. Protracted crises in places like Ukraine, Gaza, Sudan, Yemen, and Myanmar mean that people are not just facing short-term displacement, but years of disrupted lives and limited access to healthcare, education, and their livelihoods being destroyed for years on end. These prolonged emergencies place enormous strain, not only on the affected people, but also the humanitarian systems established to help the affected people, right?
Thanks, Fatima.
And
given these circumstances, what are the top priorities in the IFRC Global Plan, and which challenges require the most urgent attention in the coming year, and why, in your opinion?
The Global Plan 2026 of the IFRC is very clear about what our priorities are. And it is shaped by what communities themselves are experiencing on the ground. First of all, localization is at the center of the plan. We are committing to channel 75% of the internationally mobilized resources to the national level, because we have local Red Cross and Red Crescent national societies always as the first responders and always the last to leave. So our top priority is focusing at the local communities. We are also prioritizing fragile and high-risk context. Through our National Society Investment Framework, we are intensifying support to 25 national societies operating in the most complex and fragile environments where humanitarian access is limited and needs are very severe. Safety and access is also a fundamental priority for the IFRC, and it is also reflected in the global plan for 2026. Providing a safer working environment for volunteers and staff is also very crucial for us.
Now, Fatima, around the world, we know that funding for humanitarian action is shrinking. What does this mean, especially for people who are living through crises today, given the growing gap of funding?
The humanitarian funding shrinking, has a direct consequence for people in crisis, and it's deeply human. For families, this means less food, less access to clean drinking water, fewer health services, and reduced shelter support. Right? For communities already living on the edge, this funding gap is directly affecting their survival and their hope for recovery. Children dropping out of school, preventable illnesses going untreated, and households falling deeper into poverty. Right? So it's already for communities living in very harsh conditions. This is not just a funding gap. It means making painful choices every day, which is directly linked with their lives, right?
I want to turn quickly to security. With 17 million volunteers worldwide and over 289,000 local branches, and given 57 Red Cross and Red Crescent staff and volunteers have been killed in the past 2 years, how does the IFRC ensure the safety and security of its personnel, especially in high-risk areas?
Of course, as the world's largest humanitarian network, our message is very clear. Violence against humanitarian workers must stop, and it's non-negotiable, right? The local volunteers and staff are the backbone of our humanitarian response, and they face the greatest risk because they live and work in these communities affected by conflict and violence. Our approach is on several levels, but we prioritize intensely on humanitarian diplomacy, engaging with governments, armed actors, and decision makers to promote respect for international humanitarian law and to ensure safer access for our volunteers and staff engaging in the humanitarian work. We also focus on strengthening the acceptance and trust of the community, which is grounded in our principles, focusing on neutrality, impartiality, and independence. And we also work very closely with the national societies in building their capacity on security training, operational protocols, duty of care, all tailored for high-risk context. And, this supports the volunteers to be better prepared, to respond in such situations.
Fatima, if the global plan is not fully funded, what are the real-world implications, and what message would you like governments and donors watching this program to take away?
Well, if the global plan is not fully funded, it would mean direct and dire implications on human lives. Millions of people will not receive the assistance that they urgently need. Preventable suffering will increase, recovery will be, of course, delayed, and communities will remain trapped in this cycle of crisis and vulnerability. Lives that could have been saved will be lost, not because solutions are not available, but because resources are very insufficient, right? And despite all these challenges, the IFRC and our national societies will remain with the communities. Our volunteers and staff are part of the communities they serve, and we do not leave when conditions become difficult. So it's their daily reality, and they continue to do their best even when things get challenging. Our message to the governments and donors is simple and very clear, that invest where impact is greatest and at the community level. Every investment in the IFRC is multiplied through local action, volunteer networks, and trusted relationships. So supporting the global... Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Fatima. Thank you. I wish we had more time, but thank you for sharing your insights, shedding light on IFRC's Global Plan 2026 and the importance of locally led humanitarian action. We'll continue to follow how this plan unfolds as humanitarian needs grow worldwide.